Good evening and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. This meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
City Attorney Joden. Give me just a moment, Mr. Mayor. I apologize.
And you have a dark blank screen showing, facing us.
I will reshare the screen. I apologize. There must have been a glitch.
Okay.
Can you read now, Mr. Mayor?
And I'll read that. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's efforts to broaden public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary and ask that you please read the following tips and guidelines for the app usage and your participation. Thank you. Please continue, Madam Clerk.
City Attorney Joden.
Here.
City Manager Harlow Schalk. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. She may be trapped in the attendees. I know she's here. I literally just talked to her. There she is. City Manager Harlow Schalk.
Whoo, here.
Commissioner Dean.
Here.
Commissioner Logan is excused for the record, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, he is.
Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Here.
I do not see Commissioner Halliday at this point.
Commissioner Halliday is also excused.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Collins.
Here. Comments or questions from the commission?
Yeah, Mayor, I have two things.
Please go ahead.
Great. So I wasn't sure if I should ask this question during the city manager's report, but I'll go ahead and just flag it here. And I did ask Rachel if she would be willing to share just an update on the city's use of the freed up general fund dollars as a result of the CARES Act, and particularly those items that we didn't sort of fully articulate during the budget process this summer. So I'm happy to wait, sort of defer to city manager if that's something maybe she could share during her report, or if she'd like to do it now.
Let's wait for her report.
Okay, great. And then I have one other item. So I just wanted to make a comment related to the commission's consideration of the proposed right-of-way for Oaks and Vandelay, which I think we considered last Monday. I'm going to just speak personally for my perception or feelings over that conversation. I still feel like I have a lack of clarity on some of the questions that came up during the meeting. Additionally, during the final discussion and deliberation by the commission, the city manager submitted into the chat box a reference to a particular section of the International Fire Code. Following the meeting, I became aware of the fact that members of the public can't see the chat comment box. This information, which again was provided fairly late in the deliberations and wasn't fully discussed by the commission, appears to provide some clarity around the IFC's standard for fire access codes within section 503-2. So given this information, I believe it appropriate to reevaluate the proposal that was previously in front of the commission. Now, I am not asking or seeking consensus today, nor am I asking for a discussion on this today. What I'm really would like to just seek is confirmation from the city attorney that similar to the process that the commission took to reconsider the establishment of a lighting district, that it would be appropriate to seek reconsideration at a future formal commission meeting. And if supported by the majority of the commission, that it would then be noticed and placed on a subsequent commission agenda. So I just wanted to see if that, again, sort of consistent with, I think, the way the commission handled the lighting district, that would be the appropriate process if the commission so chose to do so.
Attorney Jordan.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Commissioner Lachlan. Yeah, I was just pulling up the bylaws as soon as you said that, and I agree. It should be substantially similar as that street lighting district that the commission reconsidered, and I'll read just for the commission's benefit and the record. Reconsideration of previous actions. Any two commissioners, including the mayor, both of whom must have previously voted on the prevailing side, may submit a motion to the commission proposing that a matter previously acted upon by the commission be reconsidered. Any such motion for reconsideration shall fail unless it receives 3 affirmative votes. So I will double check what we did with that street lighting district, but my recollection is that a commissioner brought it up at a regular commission meeting. And I suppose that could be the purpose of this. We need to get it teed up and noticed and get it on an agenda for the public to understand that this is a voting action. So I think maybe here tonight, if the commission is ready, if they're not, if they want to discuss it further, I think we're looking for 2 of the commissioners who voted to not accept the right-of-way dedication. If I remember right, if that was the correct motion.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Are you done, Commissioner O'Loughlin?
Mr. Mayor,
So yes, please go ahead.
I guess it's just a question for, I guess, future discussion, or if we could get even an email summary or something, if there has been additional discussion with the developer regarding this issue. I know when I was leaving work today, I think I have a voicemail. I've never spoken to the developers, but it looked like they were reaching out, and I'm going to guess that maybe they reached out to other commissioners as well. But I haven't listened to it yet, but that's what it looked like. But I wonder if we could get maybe more background information too, if there have been additional discussions prior to that discussion.
Yeah, and Commissioner Dean, I think that would be helpful, just so that you know, for transparency purposes, I did email the city manager earlier this week asking what is the staff's position on next steps, and the response I got back was it's the developer's property. So to my knowledge, that I don't know that there's been discussions since, but I also, requested that if there were sort of any communications, or if there are plans for any sort of communications, that's helpful to know. So, I guess I would, if the desire is to, if the city attorney is seeking some sort of affirmative to notice, I can't remember my sense of the conversation on the lighting district was that we didn't discuss it during the administrative meeting, that we were told the formal motion had to be made at the formal commission meeting. Was that posted on the agenda, Thomas? Is that what you're saying? We need some direction today to get something noticed on the November 8th meeting?
Mayor Collins, Commissioner, I would defer. Manager Holoshock has her hand up, so I want to ask her to weigh in first before I.
Go ahead, Manager Holoshock. You have the floor, Manager Holoshock. You're on
No,
mute.
I'm trying to find an unmute. Apologies. I hit that earlier. I'll just respond to the points brought up here. There's a second email that I sent to Commissioner O'Loughlin yesterday. So I'll forward that all to you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have not been able to open my email for some reason the last 24 hours. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Attorney Jordan, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
Mayor, Commissioner O'Loughlin, let me, because I think when that street lighting district issue came up, I was out of the office. I want to double check what Eric advised. I want to be consistent with that. I don't want to give you wrong advice, but I think that is ultimately, yes, the motion has to be noticed up to the public, not necessarily a legal public notice, but we need to get it on an agenda and then have an affirmative vote. The question that I'm struggling with is this provision in the bylaws that say any two commissioners, both of whom previously voted on the prevailing site, may submit a motion to the commission, and that's what I'm contemplating. Can that be done in today? Is it just a simple request that it be put on a future commission meeting for a vote? So maybe if I could, maybe we go through the agenda and I can circle back before the end of the meeting.
Sure, let's do that. So any other commissioner comments or discussion? Okay. Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council. Do we have a member of the Citizens Council present, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I didn't receive an advance notice that any member was planning on being here this evening from HCC, and I don't see a representative in the attendees tonight, so I'm going to assume that no one was available.
Thank you. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Want to share a couple things for tomorrow. First, I'll turn it over to Sheila and Amanda, who are both here. The first is to say that I asked Sheila to provide kind of an overview of where all the dollars are and how those have been spent. And then the second, Amanda has been our lead on the contract with the Helena Area Community Foundation, who is responsible for implementing the distribution of the nonprofit grants. And one of the questions that has come up, and so I appreciate that it came up yesterday. So Sheila, if you could go big picture, and then Amanda to the HAS. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Manager Hollerschak, Mayor and Commissioners. So with all of the General Fund CARES Act savings, all of those funds have been committed and appropriated in the budget. The only item that we have, the only amount that we have not distributed to date is the $402,000 to Helena Area Community Foundation. And we are still in the negotiation of finalizing that contract. And I will let Amanda further give an update on the status of that. But we had $1.347 million that was left to be committed, and we have committed all of those funds, and they are when they were originally presented in the preliminary budget, there was just a line item that it was for ARPA fund savings, but we had since committed those funds in the appropriate areas in the final budget resolution. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Comments or questions for Director Danielson? Thanks. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. The only thing that I really have to add from what Sheila already mentioned was we've come basically to a potential question around policy related to how we want to implement the spending of the $402,000 the Helena Area Community Foundation will be receiving. The question arises around whether or not we want to include organizations with that advocate for or are religiously affiliated. This question came up in other MOUs that we have had. We have precluded those types of organizations from receiving funding in the past, and Thomas can potentially speak to that more closely. The information that we put in our initial contract with, or the MOU with Helena Area Community Foundation, mirrors what was included in how we advertise on our buses, for example, was another area in which we have precluded those types of messaging or those types of organizations from using city space or city funds. So the question came because many of our local nonprofits are religiously affiliated in some way. Habitat for Humanity, Good Samaritan, for example, others that do good work in our community. And we are, I think, at a bit of a question mark at this point with knowing whether or not we want to continue to preclude those types of organizations from receiving funds, or to include them in this new Helena Area Community Foundation MOU. And one of the suggestions that we've come to with the Community Foundation was to have projects, the project specific that the funds would be used for would not be able to be used for advocacy of any sort of religious viewpoint, but that the organizations themselves would not be excluded based solely on the fact that they are religiously affiliated. So at this point, it's somewhat of a policy question, and I think that's where we were wanting just to bring it to the commission to see what your thoughts are. But beyond that, the rest of the points within the MOU have been negotiated, and I think we're all in agreement at this point. So
that was thank you, Amanda. That was the last piece, which, like I said, I was appreciative that Commissioner O'Loughlin brought up. This last year, there was a lawsuit settled, and in that lawsuit, there was a Supreme Court ruling. Specifically, the ruling was around whether public funds could be given to private schools, especially those that are religious. And that was part of a Supreme Court ruling, and out of that, there was a sharing specific that it was okay, but the other part of it is that we can always be more strict in Helena around interpretation, and wanted to make sure that first you were aware that they could in fact be giving grants to nonprofits that are religious organizations. I will say Good Samaritan is one of them as well, and they're one of our partners, and potentially one that we could be looking at ARPA dollars to support in some sort of housing, just to put out there. There's a longer term view around these connections with our nonprofits. The compromise was to require that none of these special projects, these specific project awards, have no religious connection. So that was the solution, but I wanted to make sure you all were aware of kind of that dilemma that we're in. We could go either way, but we wanted to make sure and get some guidance. We don't need a formal decision, but that's the update on both, I think, the primary, which was the Helena Area Community Foundation Nonprofits Award, and that was around $402,000. Is that right, Amanda? Okay. And then, great. Then the second point was just making sure you were aware of the religious implications and our attempt to try and make sure that those aren't at all a part of the grant making. So that's it on that front. I'll let you have any questions. Go for it. Sorry, Mayor.
Let me get it clear. You say you didn't want a decision now from us?
You don't need to make a decision. We were of the opinion that the project's specific grant contract was sufficient enough to keep the city from being part of giving money to a religious organization that would infer actually the city supporting religious intent with those dollars. And again, we've had a Supreme Court lawsuit settled that said that the city could give those dollars out. So that's the.
So then if the Supreme Court said it already, so what's the argument here? I'm a little confused.
There isn't an argument. We were just wanting to make sure you know what's going on and why it hasn't been completed.
Because we've been doing it for a while, haven't we? God's love, Good Samaritan. We've been doing it. So,
Yeah, I'm not aware if there's been grants from the city to those organizations in the past.
go ahead, Commissioner Jane.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious, is there language that we've used at all in the development of the Housing Trust Fund paperwork, considering that so many of the housing groups are religiously affiliated, that we could use here? Because I do think that, I mean, obviously in our community, the people who are doing a lot of this work, you know, are religiously affiliated organizations, and that, you know, that we are a small community. It's not like we have, I mean, we do have tons of nonprofits, but I mean, most of them in this area of work, many are religiously affiliated. So if we have language that we can maybe use that's already been included in some of that other development with the Housing Trust Fund, I think great. But I think the proposal that you've provided just now, I mean, fits my need. But I would definitely say that, you know, I don't think we can afford to not, you know, try to provide the best bang for our buck in terms of serving the community, because they're just, we just don't have that many organizations that don't fall into that category.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Yeah, I guess I have maybe a bigger picture question about the 402,000. Do you all have you all set, or has the foundation set goals, or what's the sort of scope of those grants? And is there also a general sense of what the size of the grants would be to individual entities?
So yes, there is specificity within the grant contract with the HACF. I think I see Amanda's pulling it up right now. So she'll share that to you in a second. And then there's also, go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you, Manager Harlow-Schock, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Currently, and I apologize, I've pulling up this document as we speak, so bear with me just for a moment. So we purposely left the scope of the grants somewhat open based on need. So the parameters that were put around this was that the grantees, the work would need to be related to recovery from the pandemic. It precludes certain activities, which includes advocating for political or religious belief, promoting or soliciting for purchase of tobacco products, consumption of alcoholic beverages, commercial transactions for pornography, sexually explicit goods, avoidance or termination of pregnancy, and or any advocates for violence, discrimination against any individuals or groups. In terms of the amounts, I have to check that again as well. I apologize. I think the version that I'm looking at is not the most recent, but my recollection is that they're in the $10,000 to $14,000 range, and that they need to be used within, or priority is given to projects that will be happening right in our jurisdiction. But if they are potentially organizations that are outside of the jurisdiction but serve the City of Helena greater, those would be included as well. So it's more parameters related to projects that would not be included as opposed to a particular goal. And that was based off of the fact that at the time that we met with the joint city and county commission in February, there was not an expressed goal that was set forth for staff. So it was more related to need, and leaving it to the board to make those determinations, the Helena Area Community Foundation Board, and then just helping to make sure that the grants are legally sound for the city.
Thank you, Amanda. Commissioner O'Laughlin?
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, I just think as I think all are getting more and more correspondence related to community members experiencing homelessness and sort of what the city's role is. I was just curious about sort of the extent to which that is being thought about in the context of the $402,000 that's headed out the door. So I think that's just more of a comment than anything. Just given sort of where we sit and where I think we're hearing pretty significant needs, was just wondering if that is a topic of discussion amongst the potential grantees of pooling resources or thinking about sort of what those resources could look like in a holistically. So.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and commissioners. I just wanted to, I had the wrong document pulled up. I had the annual funds document in front of me. So I do have the exact numbers that are related to the grants for the $402,000, and they are $2,000 and not to exceed $14,000.
And not to exceed what?
Not to exceed $14,000.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Hollishock, is your report concluded?
No, sorry.
Please continue.
Thank you, Mayor. So the message I forwarded over to the three of you was the one that was sent last night to Commissioner O'Laughlin in response to the ask as to what are the next steps on the mall site. So the state of Montana is really focused on private property rights, and the process for dedicating right-of-way, because it's really what they were doing, dedicating right-of-way, is one that has been a part of all of the reviews of Vandelay. So we had the administrative meeting where we brought up the details around this specific property and the fire code, as well as the streets code and public works requirements, were all discussed at the admin meeting. They were brought into the commission meeting, the first round, and then this last round. Whether or not the analysis, I understand the interest in making sure that the community is aware of the fire code sections and how those play out, but ultimately there isn't a change in the determination. The determination, which was brought before all of you, was that the fire marshal and our streets team and the team here had reached out. There had been several conversations with the property owner. And I'll share it to you that yesterday I asked the team what they would suggest doing, and we landed on a letter in writing as to how and what can be done moving forward from the city. So I requested the staff add as an attachment all of the correspondence noting the flags against the construction and noting the issues, as well as the impacts on the right-of-way dedication. It also has to share for Vandelay that we cannot accept what is unsafe. Also share that what would make it safe, like we've shared to you all before. And as you know, I shared during the commission meeting, I offered to come back to the commission and ask for dollars to fix the entrance off of Prospect if they would please meet the requirements of the fire code as described by our fire marshal as well as our transportation team. David also gave them details on how to handle the variation and how they that they wanted, but they did not decide to do that. And then last, they can always keep the road as a private road. So that there was any implication that not enough information was provided to the public implies that the process that we bring our right-of-way dedications forward is actually flawed as well. So if the point is to bring it up, I want to make sure that I understand the concern. And if it's something that we need to make sure in the future that the right-of-way itself is supposed to provide access into the new lots. And so being careful with how we handle rights-of-way, different from managing private property and their actual construction activities. So as I shared, Mark shared during the conversation that he and Anna had an agreement. I don't know what that was. He also shared to Sharon and I that Heather, you and Andres had coffee with them to design the streets, but I'm sure it was well before anybody actually knew what was going in. And that's really where we're at with the street. Ultimately, we are where they were at the beginning is not where they ended up with what's on site, and the property owner gets to decide how they manage their site. So of course the commission can absolutely bring it forward. I just want to be fair to the team and share that if there is a process problem, I want to make sure and understand it. And then second, if there's more information, this letter will be done by the end of this week, which documents this is what has happened. This is the detail back and forth from the city. But they can always keep the property private property, and a commission can always introduce a motion to accept the street against the recommendation of staff. That can happen too. So I've challenged them to provide those details and share that to the community. But the implication that just a fire code was the only reason for it isn't fully the issue, I don't believe, because the whole of the recommendation isn't just the fire code. It includes the transportation and the larger right-of-way dedication. It is determination, not just of the fire code. So I just want to make sure that when we bring it back forward, if you ask for information, which is it? Do you want the whole of what it is and why we don't recommend it again? Or my hope is that this letter helps spell out more for all of us what has been in conversations back and forth between the building team and this property owner too. So that's first, and I'll send you guys send you all a copy of the letter when it's completed. On ARPA, next week is the meeting with you all, the working session. The agenda was posted yesterday afternoon. It included details from Sheila around the asks that the staff have had. One of the tools that we've used in the past is the balancing act calculator. There's a couple of ways that we entered the conversation around the general fund. The first was we could send it out, the calculator, send it out to you all. You all can think over the ideas that have been brought forward and then add anything that you would like to see happen and submit them before next week. Or we can go through the working session and then spend the time on each item as well. So it seems as though we haven't had a lot of conversation around the kinds of asks that the team has brought forward. Commissioner O'Loughlin, the items they share around homelessness and some of the behavioral health issues that have come up in the community recently, those are items that the team has suggested funding on, and some of the conversations that we've had with the United Way and Good Samaritan, as well as with the behavioral health teams with the county. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that we have built out that balancing act tool, and I can send it out to you beforehand, but I feel like you may not have enough information on what is being proposed, and we should do that during the working session. So we'll have that made available to you as well. If you have any questions so far on those two things, let me know.
Commissioner Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one on the balancing act piece. So are we going to, for this working session, are we going to be asked to be finding consensus on items? And if so, I think having it earlier would probably be most helpful. And if not, if it's more of an information session for us to, talk through things, and then we'll have more time to think about it, do our own research, and then deliberate together at another session. That clarity would be helpful. My second question is on the last item, and I apologize for not getting my hand up soon enough, but I'm wondering if we could also get a copy of the MOU as far as the draft, however far the process is with that Amanda's been working on for Helena Area Community Foundation.
Right.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Yeah, I think I have the same sort of question about at what point you're seeking decisions on the ARPA funds. There are some of these that I'm not sure that we've talked about really at all, and so some additional information I think would be very helpful. I have two questions, and hopefully this is something perhaps that you all could put together in advance of the meeting. One, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to get a sense from you all on the funding recommendations, which of those are in your mind sort of one-time expenditures versus, and I know some of these are described as a pilot, if it is something that would require the city to continue, if you all have identified other sources of funding to continue it, or if this would be something potentially that the city would want to build into its budget. So one time only versus ongoing, again, question, given that this is one-time funding. And then given I think one of them is related to the golf course. If we could also get just sort of an update on that fund specifically, where it sits, and if that makes sense to do just another sort of recap of what we budgeted, that would be helpful too.
Thank you. Manager Hollishook.
Sheila, yeah, Director Danielson, do you want to hop in and answer any questions you might want to now? But these are great. We can get these ready for you.
Yeah, so thank you, Manager Hollishook. So all of the items in the simulator are intended to be, to my understanding, one-time funding. They could potentially be ongoing programs, but for the purposes of this conversation and the allocation of these funds, it's expected that these are going to be one-time donations from the city. In regards to the golf fund, I can certainly I've been working with Director Panozzo actually on looking at the golf fund, and we're about 3/4 of the way through of looking at the status of that fund. And so I can have that information prepared and sent out to the commission in advance.
Awesome, thank you. The next item, so we'll have that ready. Depending on, I'll send to you the balancing act so you guys can see that, so that you can all see the mayor and commissioners, the dollar amounts, what they look like. And I know that Jake is also building a Be Heard tool for the community afterwards, and that would make it even, so at the same time that you're reviewing it, we have the Be Heard tool ready so that the community can see what we're talking about and the kinds of things that can be funded. Sheila pointed out earlier today that there are really are restrictions around what can be spent. And I know that there's always this hesitation of putting it out before the commission makes a decision. So want to be respectful of this first work session. If we get through it and it makes sense, that we make that information available to the community through Be Heard as well. If we need to have a second session, that's fine as well too. So we'll plan that. And it may, unfortunately, it's the first time out for these ARPA dollars, but I want to make sure that we don't hold ourselves back from having the conversations you all want to as well. So more time with you if we need it is needed, and based on how things go next week. Take any questions on that too.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one more question?
Please, go ahead.
I think it might be helpful to, I know that we've talked a little bit about this in kind of the preliminary run up to having the working session, but I think it would probably be helpful, not just for the commission, but for the public as well, to have a review of what these dollars can actually be used for at the start. I know that things have continued to evolve, but I think that probably would be a helpful thing, especially as we're getting the community engaged now, and they've not necessarily been as engaged since this is our first conversation.
Great.
Please continue. Are you done?
Nope, sorry. There's more. There's been a lot going on. So I'll send you all the balancing act tool, and you can have a look at it before we get in next week and think through. I'll also share to you the drafted Be Heard tool. It's not ready, ready for live. It's not out there yet, but I want to make sure you have those too in advance. The team has been working on the economic development page, and the videos, the real estate tools, those are all ready. We just sent out the draft live website to our partners. So I'll be sending you guys the draft, sending you all the draft tonight, so that you can see it in advance. Our partners are MBAC, the Chamber, TBID, the BID, all of those groups are being consulted to see if there's any additions or edits. This is a year-long project that we're really excited will help recruit to the area what would be helpful in building out both the housing as well as our economics and businesses within the community. So there's a lot of tools that will be made available, and I'm always very interested in comments when I send those out tonight. I think I hit all of the larger picture issues that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of tonight. And next week, we also have the United Way and Good Samaritan planning to come to the joint city-county meeting to provide an update on the HOTS program, as well as the their potential emergency shelter conversation. So yesterday's, I was the only person who was available for the chamber local government conversation, and a question came up from the community around the business community around our homeless work and what we're doing to respond to the homeless that matters in our community. And I appreciate Commissioner O'Loughlin that you brought it up early in this conversation, because it is a continued conversation. They are also going to be including continuum of care conversation pieces, because the one-time dollars that we're talking about, the county is really the ongoing funder for health and human services types of activities. So if there's a gap from what they would be able to receive from the county, I want to make sure that we hear about it, and that those continuum of care include behavioral and drug addiction services that to help them get back into and on the track, because as you all know, homelessness isn't just about having a job. We've also been working with the community. Commissioner O'Loughlin, you had requested a summary that could be reused and routinely by the commission. when responding to homeless complaints and concerns. Those are, the team has almost completed the draft of that, and Thomas was just looking over it to make sure that we hit everything. So I'll send that out to you tonight as well. And then last on the homeless item, Steve, Chief Hagan and Director Hogan are both putting together a summary of the work they've been doing on homelessness inside the community currently, and then ideas moving forward. That's an additional item from them. And then this is the last item. It is around our staffing. I want to make sure that you know that we last week had our first round of fire chief, and those were really great interviews. We had an excellent pool. We were getting into our final interviews, and we've had the HCC, the Helena Citizens Council, as part of the interviews. We've also had our partners at the DNRC and Rural Fire. We're also including Missoula Fire Chief and our directors and leadership team as well. So gaining input, and our union, of course, gaining input from that larger group has really yielded some great candidates. So I'm very excited. We're going to have an excellent new fire chief. And I also want to make sure you're aware that Director Haugen has submitted her retirement letter, and she has officially noted that she'll be with us until the middle of January, and then after which time we will be looking for a new community development director. So I know we'll be honoring her and her service to the city for many years as well. We're downloading her brain trust. That brain trust goes to this larger conversation around the right-of-way dedication, and ultimately trying to make clear what those processes are and how each one comes together. This morning, the mayor and Commissioner Logan, I had asked our interim fire chief if he wouldn't reach to the two, if we couldn't include the two of them in what I'm hoping is a new method for all of you, and that is that when we kick off new projects, we have at least 2 commission members there for a kickoff, so they hear what we're working on and the approach. So the mayor and Commissioner Logan were there for our ESCI, and that's the Emergency Services Consulting Team, who are in town, that kickoff of their research and just making us aware and asking questions around what expectations are there. So the ESCI team is here through the next 2 days to gather information and data so that they can start that deeper dive into our fire service and do that fire study that we have worked to fund through the savings in the general fund. That's my update. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I just have one question for Director Hagen. How many years did you give us?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I was hired as Community Development Director, and I started January 1st, 2005. Prior to that, I served the county for 9 years.
Well, we thank you for your service. So you want to leave in January because you're starting in January. I see how you are. Okay.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay, City Clerk update. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners.
Evening.
As you can see, we have the recommendations from the mayor for the boards. One is a reappointment of Lee Schubert to the Business Improvement District. The other is for Marcia Idle. I would allow the mayor, if he'd like, to read the memo of his recommendations to the commissioners. Remember that this is just to give you an opportunity to ask questions if you have any, or discuss them amongst yourselves before a formal vote on Monday, the 8th, for these appointments.
The application is within the packet today, and for the Business Improvement District, I was recommending reappointing of Lee Schubert to a second term on the Business Improvement District. His term will begin on November 1st, 2021 and expire October 31st, 2025. And Consolidated City County Planning Board, appointment of Marsha Ida to a first term on the Consolidated City County Planning Board. Term will begin upon appointment and expire on September 1st, 2024. Please continue, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, unless there's any questions for me from the rest of the commission, that is all I have.
Comments or questions from the commission?
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Clerk. City Attorney update.
Mayor, Commissioners, just wanted to update you on the goings on since when was that? Since May 3rd, 2021, when I last updated the commission about our pre-treatment discussion with the Environmental Protection Agency. So just as background, the city has to have an industrial wastewater pre-treatment program as part of its permit from the state, its discharge permit. That permit requires the city to regulate those industrial dischargers that discharge to the city's wastewater treatment plant. Those regulations are aimed at two things: protecting the city's wastewater treatment plant from harmful chemicals, which may take the plant down, and then so that non-domestic wastewater sources do not enter our sewer system and ultimately discharge or receiving waters. The city has its industrial wastewater regulations in City Code Title 7, Chapter 4. In September of 2017, the EPA conducted an audit of the city's pretreatment program and found some issues. Subsequently, on May 14th of last year, the EPA sent the city a letter of violation alleging failure to comply with aspects of that audit. Subsequently, in July of 2020, the city and EPA conferred, and the EPA developed generally what's called a to-do list and a timeline for those requirements. The city worked to satisfy those requirements, which the city believes are paperwork requests. It's important to note that none of the deficiencies identified in the audit or letter of violation resulted in any discharge or illegal discharge of chemicals or hazardous materials or anything to the city's wastewater treatment plant or receiving waters. After July 2020, the city worked to satisfy the EPA's numerous requests. However, in November 2020, the day before Thanksgiving, EPA presented the city with what I would characterize as a one-sided and very complicated 36-page administrative order on consent, with the idea that the EPA and the city would negotiate a resolution on that consent order. The city and the EPA did engage in those negotiations for a number of months, and the city continued to work in good faith to ameliorate the alleged violations. At this time, the city has completed all of the items of that 2017 audit and the May 2020 letter of violation. But unfortunately, the city could not agree to EPA's order on administrative consent because three big reasons is that the EPA constantly changes what is required by the city and is an intangible moving target. And it's sort of like, they say, bring us a rock, we bring a rock, and then they say, not that rock. Secondly, EPA requires administrative controls that are not found in law for imposition on federal facilities, for example, Veteran Affairs. They impose conditions on the city which the city cannot control because it's in the control of another entity of the federal government, the VA. And then third, the EPA requires tasks that are not in federal regulation generally and are so vague that there could be multiple interpretations. And this is the problem that we have continuously had. And I'll get into a couple details in a second. As a result of those factors, The city felt that there was no way, if it entered into this consent agreement, that it would ever satisfy EPA, and we would always be considered to be in violation. And an example, a very recent example is, as the commission recalls, the commission approved local limits to be applied, local discharge limits on our 2 industrial wastewater users. And we submitted that to EPA. We followed the process for approval by the commission per state law and the charter. Of course, the city doesn't even agree with EPA that the commission necessarily needs to approve it, but we did it anyways. Gave notice of the meeting, and after submittal, EPA informs the city that it wants proof that the city provided 30 days public hearing notice. It's interesting to note that, and the reason I bring it up is because that isn't required in federal law. It wasn't required by EPA initially, and most importantly, it's not included as a requirement in the administrative complaint or the present compliance order that I'm updating on. Another example of so I'll back up just for a moment. So the EPA has, in September of this year, filed an administrative complaint against the city with the EPA Region 8 hearing officer and a unilateral administrative order requiring compliance. That unilateral order is substantively similar to the order on consent, and it proposes a complaint of $40,000. The EPA hasn't been willing to show how that penalty is calculated, but may be willing to discuss it in person if there's a settlement conference. Going back to that new unilateral administrative order, paragraph 89 requires the city to provide a, quote, demonstration of all applicable pretreatment standards and requirements of the Act, the Clean Water Act. The terms demonstration and applicable are subjective, and EPA has not defined them, so it's impossible to know what their expectations are. And this has sort of been the cycle that we've been engaged in since 2017 and 2020. The unilateral order and complaint suffer from the same issues as the administrative order on consent, first proposed in November of last year. And that's namely the shifting and vague and without legal authority requirements that the city can ever meet and are beyond the scope of the permit or pretreatment regulations. And additionally, the alleged violations, which since have been remedied by the city, didn't result in any contamination or pollutants to receiving waters. And the city does not believe further punitive measures are necessary, especially in regard when you have these shifting vague requirements that the city could be facing future punitive penalties. So the city's response for informational purposes is threefold. The city will be filing an answer and request a hearing on the administrative penalty before the EPA's administrative law judge. We have done that. We did that on October 6th. Secondly, we will be filing for judicial review of the unilateral administrative order in federal district court. And then third, we will attempt a settlement conference relating to that $40,000 penalty called for in the administrative order so that the city can learn more about the methodology for determining that penalty. I don't think any litigation strategy discussion is needed at this point. I don't believe the city needs to approve the defense posture at this point. EPA has basically instituted the litigation, and we are merely responding and defending the city. So I can answer any questions that the commission may have.
Comments or questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Jordan. We appreciate the update. Department direction. Transit update.
Thanks, Mayor, Commissioner. David has provided an update, and mostly again, not so much direction, but making sure that you're aware of the activities of their team and moving forward some really important actions that have been in the long term for the team. Turning it over to David.
Director Konopky.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, and City Manager. Yeah, this is just kind of a quick update for the Commission. we had discussed our last update about going out and getting a new software that would be more user-friendly for our customers. We went out with that RFQ in conjunction with MDT. We selected Spare Labs to be the provider of that. We started our initial kickoff meetings and initial discussions with them as far as implementation and getting all the customers switched over to their software. So that's going well. We're targeting around the first of the year for rollout of this new software. And some of the advantages of this new software is it's a more user-friendly interface for our customers. They'll be able to pay for their bus passes, what have you, whatever services they need from Capital Transit via this app. So in the times of COVID, this electronic means is a lot better than in-person transactions or through the mail and waiting for the mail to show up. The other aspect of this app and this software is it's designed to implement different models of transit. So we've heard demand response in public comments back in 2019 when we did our 9 outreach sessions with different members of the public and different groups wanting more basically door-to-door or dial-a-ride type service, now called demand response. So this software does allow for us to transition to a model like that if that were to be a direction the commission were to ask us to go in the future. So this app does give us a lot of flexibility and options moving forward. As far as any other updates, we're still operating our 2 fixed routes, our paratransit. We are continuing our 11-to-1 downtime to bring the buses in and sanitize them through these time periods. We are still running the East Valley route out to East Helena, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have in regards to Capital Transit. If you, I have our superintendent, Mr. Goldman, on as well, so we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Kanapke. Comments or questions from the commission? Go ahead, Commissioner Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. I had 2 questions. First, thanks for the presentation. And the memo was actually really helpful. I really appreciated the timeline that was included. It was a good refresher. My 2 questions are, first, in the memo, you all talked about evaluating kind of the success and experience and potential for expansion. How are you planning to do that evaluation, and what kind of metrics do you think you'll be using? And then my second question was in terms of the public outreach and public education strategies, if you all had thought about what those will include as this starts rolling out.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner Dean. The possibility for expansion, we're always looking to improve the service for the citizens of Helena. And, we would be mostly looking at the interaction between the new app and the users, the end users of this, and understanding, are there gaps? Are there things that we need to fix? And then relating those to our software provider and possibly improving those. And as far as the public outreach, that's all outlined in our contract with Spare. We haven't outlined that exactly of what that looks like or when that would happen, because we don't have an exact end date or rollout date for this. So once we get closer to that, or once we get a solid date, we can definitely provide the commission that public outreach component of this new rollout.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission?
Yeah, maybe just a quick question, Mayor, if that's okay.
Sure.
I know that the Helena Citizens Council has put forward recommendations, and I'm just wondering if you have any updates on sort of considering some of those. I'm specifically interested in, I think, a relatively short conversation we had in the past about the potential of adding new stops to the fixed routes. Has there been any further conversation about that or other recommendations from the HCC?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner O'Loughlin. As far as adding new stops, the target goal for the fixed routes was to keep it under a half hour. Adding more stops adds additional time into the trip. So, if the commission is interested, we can look at adding new stops and possibly increasing that time frame, or looking at stops that may be not performing as well and moving those stops around. But as far as expansion to different parts of the community, that would be tough to try to keep us within that 30-minute time frame that the commission had, that goal that the commission had requested. As far as, I think the other one was bus stop signs, and we looked at the cost of those and the implementation, and we talked with other partners throughout the state, and some do, but most don't on the stop signs. So we're still in discussion on how to best implement the signage recommendations, because it wasn't only just having the supplementary sign underneath the bus stop sign saying bus stop, but there was also some other informational items that they were looking at. And the struggles that we have with that other informational item is it's not only to be read by an able-bodied person, but then there's we have to look at Braille. We got to look at some other different languages so that we can offer it up to the entire community, not just say sighted English speaking. So we're looking into it and trying to evaluate the best course forward. And hopefully at our next update, we'll have that information for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, a quick follow-up, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So thank you for that. I think that was sort of a similar answer that we got back at the previous conversation. So I understand that there had been a previous direction of 30 minutes. I guess that's just a question, right? You all know these are recommendations by our Helena Citizens Council. If ultimately you feel that we shouldn't move forward with those recommendations, I suppose that would be helpful to know, because there is never a decision point for us to say, hey, commission, would you like to reconsider the 30 minutes? And here's sort of the options. So I guess I just look to you all to say, is that something we should consider, given the low participation rate on transit, or the usage rate of transit? Is that something we should consider?
David, I'll take
hang on over.
Okay.
Mayor and Commission, yes, that was pretty much the same answer. But as we've gone through with the COVID pandemic, we are now over the summer just kind of recovering from and getting back to our general ridership. So we will come back with a definite decision point for you. We were kind of just seeing where our ridership was going to pan out after the COVID pandemic, and then unfortunately this is continuing to go on. So we will come back with a specific decision point on the signage and the decision for the routes moving forward.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Loughlin.
Yeah, maybe just one quick question, and perhaps Elroy knows this. What's the industry standard? If you add a stop, how much time are you talking about?
Mayor, Commissioner, that's what I was going to address. The industry standard isn't necessarily, there's not a true metric to that. What there is a federal requirement for your fixed route stops. Our fixed routes, when I hear the discussion of 30 minutes, I believe people are thinking we get from the east side of town to the west side of town or north side to the south side in 30 minutes in one entire run. When in reality, it's a half hour from the transit facility to the east side of town, and it's a half hour to the transit facility from the west side of town, and that's one bus. That's the same with north and south here. So it's a loop. It's half a loop is a 30-minute run. Federal government requires paratransit service to be provided in the same manner of what your loop runs are or your fixed route run is. So a paratransit passenger should not be on a bus any longer heading any one direction according to how our system is set up for 30 minutes or longer. They should not be any longer than 30 minutes. So if you add more time, you're adding more impact to the paratransit rider, believe it or not, because they then have to schedule out even further in advance to arrange their arrival time or pickup time from their destination or origin point. So those are the things you have to look at and you have to be cognizant of and cautious of when trying to add more stops. The other thing is the federal government looks at the metric for a rate of speed between stops and hours of operation. So it's a very complex formula. The only thing you can do when you add more stops is to consider, instead of more stops, is to add more routes. One of the ways around that is you can run paratransit service mixed with demand response, and you could have fixed route buses that would still run. But once people move into that mixed model of transportation, the logic goes out the window for supporting or maintaining fixed route buses. They should then just consider fixed demand response as the entire model. So it gets really complex, as it does with signage for bus stops. In the state of Montana, you can have anything from what we have as the basic to the extreme, which I have yet to see an extreme in the state of Montana. The closest I came was Kalispell with just the transit stops and with some little pamphlet board things where they put in brochures. And the new ones that are coming out are similar to what we're doing downtown with parklets. Bozeman's using those now, and they don't have any signs at all. It's just 2 benches, a couple flower pots, and that's their bus stop. So what you do with the stops, how you design them, the amount of time you need for them, it all depends on what the city wants to look at. And we do consider all recommendations, and many of the HCC recommendations were the same kind of input we took back in 2019. And we do try to do our best to incorporate those comments to make the system what the community would like it to see.
Thank you. At this time, is there any public comments for this topic? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I see no raised hands and I have no written public comment on this matter.
Thank you. Review of future agenda items for the next commission meetings. Madam Hollishock.
Hi there, Mayor. The attachment shows the projected titles that we have anticipated for the future agendas. You'll see on there if there's any items or questions on things you would like to have added, please let me know. We'll make sure they are added. The next commission meeting, like I said earlier, is the city-county joint meeting, and we have the ARPA work session. On the commission meeting on the 8th, we have the items as noted, and then last, the city admin meeting. Details are there as well. So if there's any further additions or items you want to make sure are added, I think the working session for the redevelopment agency is something that we'll go ahead and I'm not sure if that has been shared out because there's needs to be some dates set up for that. I know that we had wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for ARPA conversations as well. So just want to note those competing priorities. And last, while not on here, we'll want to talk about, and I'm getting ready to schedule a meeting with Vandelay and Thomas to talk through the onboarding of new commissioners and what that looks like as well, by way of training and just information overall. As I also shared to Commissioner Dean a strategy conversation that would be an interesting conversation with you all when your new commission members join as well. So that's it. I haven't put them on here because
Thank you.
I have an opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.
At this time, is there anyone from the public wishes to address the commission? Madam Clerk, do we have any raised hands?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I do have one individual, I believe it's Ms. Goodhue, who'd like to speak with the commission.
You have the floor, Ms. Goodhue. You have the floor.
She, I think she needs to be unmuted tonight.
You have the floor, Ms. Goodhue.
She should have her mic, manager.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, and City Manager. I'm Chris Goodhue, and you had an item on your agenda at the last meeting regarding a sewer hookup for my husband and I on 221 Alfalfa Road here in Helena. And we sat through your meeting, and I realized it appeared to be a very long meeting, and I think that all of you were very tired, it seemed, but it seemed to us that by the time it got to our agenda item that we weren't given an appropriate amount of time to present our application. And what I would like to ask you tonight is if you would consider reassessing our application for this hookup and putting it on the agenda for your November 8th meeting. There are several points that we would like to make that I don't think were addressed in the meeting, and I think there might have been some misunderstandings as to what we are asking for. I think that it seemed to me that it looked like you thought we were requesting the city water hookup, which we are not. We do have a well that has been approved by DEQ. There is an easement that runs through our property that has been there since 2000. It was put there when they put the city sewer line in from Fort Harrison. And at that time, the former owner of our property had an agreement with Rob Dunn from Fort Harrison that if there was ever going to be something built on that property, that there would be a city hookup available. And when they installed the city sewer line through that property, they actually already put the tap connection in there for that. And so when we bought this property, we were under the impression that that wouldn't be a problem, that there would be a hookup for that sewer line. And we just wanted to make that clear and would like to try to present our case a little bit more at your next meeting, if that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Goodhue. You will be informed.
Okay, thank you for your time.
You bet. Madam Clerk. Oh, I see Attorney Jordan, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Yeah, Mayor, Commissioners, I just wanted to circle back on Commissioner O'Loughlin's question about the process to reconsider the Oaks Vandelay right-of-way dedication. So yeah, I think tonight if two commissioners wanted to, quote, submit the motion tonight, you can't act on it tonight, but I guess give direction, and we will staff will put it on, and what we did with the street lighting district reconsideration was put it under commission questions, comments for November 8th, and then you would consider and then take a vote on that motion. And then if it passes, if the vote to reconsider passes, staff would then put the item back or put it on the November 22nd agenda. So for tonight, I think just two commissioners giving approval, indication, direction that they would like that motion submitted to the commission for formal consideration on 11/8.
Thank you, Attorney Jordan. Commissioner Halliday, sorry, Commissioner O'Loughlin. You have the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I guess, see if there is interest in doing that. I mean, I think there was just a lot of, a lot of questions during the meeting, and I think this is worth further conversation. So that, yeah, like that's what I would ask if we could make that motion
Well,
on November 8th.
I don't have a problem with that. I thought he meant that you would make the motion.
Yeah, I think I'm a little confused too, because it sounds like this is a little different than the way we did it for the lighting district, unless maybe I'm missing something. I looked back at the July 12th and I didn't see it on that agenda, but if this is the way that the city attorney is, it looks like we're just asking for 2 members of
Right.
the commission to request the motion. I mean, it seems like based off of what Commissioner Logan did, I could make a motion on the 8th.
That is Mayor Collins, Commissioner O'Loughlin, that is also correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Dean.
Thanks, Richard. I'm curious, do you know if we'll be able to see the letter that staff is drafting to the developer before then?
Manager Hollishock.
Yeah, I will, I committed to making sure you all get a copy of it when it's done, and you get a copy of exactly what's sent at the same time. You bet.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Attorney Jordan. Madam Clerk, do we have any other who wishes to address the commission?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I see no other hands raised, and I've received no additional or any, excuse me, written comment.
Thank you. Manager Hollishaw, you have your directions.
Yes, thank you. As I understand it, we'll go ahead and plan for next week's ARPA conversation. I'll share to you tonight the ARPA calculator on the balancing act, so you have that in advance. As well, I'll share to you all the drafted economic development page and the work that has been, and it includes a staggering amount of work by our ITGIS team, Sovereign, not Dennis Quaid. All of that will be part of the email tonight as well. We'll send you the contract from the Helena Area Community Foundation. We will also note the golf course revenue losses for, and just an update on the budget overall for the golf course as part of the conversation under ARPA. And last, the letter we'll make sure is sent to you all. Oh, I apologize. On the Helena Area Community Foundation, I believe I understood that you were all okay with our distinction of, for those organizations where there's a religious affiliation, using project level analysis to ensure that they are not of a specific religious intention, that you were in agreement with that, in support of that, not a motion, just a support of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final comments from the commission? This meeting is adjourned.